Okay, good morning. Okay, we are on Parshas Balak this week, about to go into the land of Israel, and from last week's Parsha, Chukas, we remember at the end of the Parsha, there were several battles as we're sitting at the edge of the land of Israel, right by getting ready to go to the Jordan River. Last week's Parsha ended that we're on the banks of the Jordan, and we had fights with Amalek attacked us, and then the Emoiri and Sichon and Og were killed by Moshe with battles there. And the Jewish people are getting closer to going into Israel. And we suddenly come along to Parshas Balak. Balak was appointed, we're on page 856, just to remind everybody. 856, 857 in the art scroll. Balak, well, let's just start from the first verse, what's verse 2 here. Vayar Balak ben Tzipor, Eis kol asher asa Yisrael le'emoiri. Balak, the son of Tzipor, saw that all that the Jewish people, all that Klal Yisrael had done to the Emoiri, to the Amorites. V'yagar Moav mipnei ha'am mo'ed ki ravhu yakatz Moav mipnei b'nei Yisrael. Moav was scared, very frightened of the people. Which people was he frightened of? The Jewish people, because there were lots of them, and Moab became disgusted in the face of Israel. And so Vayomer Moab said, Moab being the people of Moab, El Ziknei Midian, to the elders of Midian, Ata Yelach Chaku Hakahal Eskol Tzivosenu Kilchech Hashoir Eis Yerek Hasade Balak ben Tzipor Melech La Moav Be'es Hahid. They said to the elders of Midian, look at these people, they're going to wipe us out. They're wiping out the entire surroundings, just like an ox licks up the greenery of the field. So they're like marching along and just wiping people out. And then the Torah says, oh, this guy Balak, who we mentioned in the first verse of the Parsha, Balak ben Tzipor, was the king of Moab at that time. So we've got this discussion between Moab and Midian, two nations. Now let's remember who they were. Moab was the son of Lot and his daughter. And we go all the way back to Lot and when they ran away from Sodom and Gomorrah, and the towns were wiped out, and Lot and his two daughters landed up in a mountain, and they figured out the world is finished, there's just three of us left, we need to continue mankind. And his two daughters conspired to sleep with their father. They got him drunk one night, his daughters slept with him, second night same thing. Two children born from those two unions were Ammon and Moab. This is that same Moab. This is the nation of Moab. Midian is the nation that Moshe's wife, Moshe's father-in-law, Yisroi, was the chief priest, the high priest of Midian. Midian's another nation in the region. And so now we've got this like mixture between Midian and Moab, where it tells us that Balak was the king of Moab. Well, Balak was actually a Midianite. And he was appointed king over the Moabite people because it was an extraordinary measure that he was a nobleman, a leader of the key people of Midian, and he was a warrior. They knew who he was, and they figured we need somebody in these emergency times to help us, to protect us, to save us, because this Jewish people are moving along and they're about to walk through our land and attack us. We need help. The Moabites knew, however, the Jews were not allowed to attack them. They were related to us. Lot and Abraham were related, very closely related. Lot was Abraham's nephew. And we're not going to attack our family. We learned that in last week's Parsha. We just wanted to walk through their territory, not even touch anything. Anything we took from them, we would buy. And they refused. And so they wanted now to bring somebody in who was going to help them defeat the Jews. But they knew that they couldn't really defeat the Jews through battle because they'd seen Moshe and the Jewish people had taken out Sichon and Og in last week's Parsha, wiped them out completely. So we've got this Balak ben, Balak ben Zippor, who now has to come up with a plan to wipe out the Jewish people. He knows he's not going to wipe us out through a regular battle. He's got to do something different. So he engages. So if you look at verse 5, Vayishlach Malachim, he sends messengers, El Bilam ben Ba'or, to this person called Bilam ben Ba'or. Petorah, that's a place where he lived in Petor, which is by the river and the land of the members of his people, to summon him, saying to him, says, this people have come out of Egypt, it's covered the surface of the earth, it sits right opposite me, please come and curse the people. Now, Balak says, well, we need you, Bilam, and we're going to come back in a moment, we'll discuss who this Bilam was. And we need you to come along and curse this people, because the verse continues, because it's too powerful for me to do anything. I'm not going to be able to strike it and drive it from the land. And I know something. I know that you are a person who can bless people. Whoever is blessed and whoever is cursed whoever is blessed, and whoever is cursed. You have this ability to talk to Hashem, to basically invoke a blessing on somebody, that person that is blessed will receive that blessing. And if you curse somebody, the curse is going to sit on that person or on those people. So come along and curse the Jewish people. So he sends officers of elders of Moab and Midian, and they went with these charms in their hand. They came to Bilam and they spoke to him what Balak had said to them. Now, let's go back. Who was Bilam? The first time we encounter Bilam, there's a Gemara in Soita that says Paro had a problem. Right at the beginning of the book of Shmos, the book of Exodus, we come along and says there's a new Paro, and he comes along and he says, oh, these Jewish people are a problem. They are multiplying in huge ways, and we need to do something about this Jewish threat that we've got hanging over our heads. He had 3 advisors. Gemara in Soita says on Daf Yud Aleph on page 11a that Paro had these 3 advisors. They were Eov, Bilam, and Yisro. And they concocted a plot to wipe out the Jewish people. Whether the plot was originally thought up by Paro or whether it was thought up by Bilam, either way, one of them figured, let's wipe out the Jewish boys. They knew through prophecy, remembering who the Egyptians were, they were the world's greatest magicians. And we're not talking about modern magic, which is not magic. It's sleight of hand, it's decoys, it's skill as opposed to anything else. In those times, there was real magic. And Bilam was one of the greatest magicians of the time. And so they knew that through water, the leader of the Jewish people who was going to redeem the Jews would be wiped out. Something to do with water would mess up would kill the leader of the Jewish people who was going to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. So and they knew this through astrology, through magic, they'd worked it all out. So Bilam comes along and he says, let's run with the story that Bilam came up with the plot. Bilam said, let's take all the Jewish boys and throw them into the River Nile. Because that way, we knew that there's going to be he's decimated through water. If we wipe the leader of the Jewish people out through water when he's born, he's never going to be the leader of the Jewish people. Let's do that. And Paro liked this idea. And so therefore came up the plan, let's wipe out the Jewish boys. So Bilam was, this is the best way to do it. We can get rid of these enemies. The Jewish people were enemies of everybody in the world. We're going to wipe them out.
Nothing changed.
That's part of the problem. Because we don't realize who we are. That's really the problem. If we knew who we were and we knew our connection to Hashem, we'd be perfect. And that comes out later in this week's Parsha, in Parshas Balak. The other two advisors, Yisro was sitting there and thinking, no, there's something about the Jewish people that is good. We need to not just wipe these people out. And so what did Yisro do? He ran away. That's where he became the prince of Midian, the high priest of Midian. Eov, on the other hand, was kind of neutral, didn't know what to do. So what does the neutral countries in the world do till our times? Kept quiet, didn't say a word. The Gemara brings that each of them was punished or rewarded mida keneged mida, measure for measure. And this is so true in everything we do. Exactly what they did, so they were punished or merited a reward based on what they did. What happened with Eov? We have a book of Eov. The question is, what is Eov? Who wrote Eov is a whole big question. It was in a Gemara. We learned it in Daf Yomi last week in Bava Basra. The book of Eov. There's many opinions who actually wrote the book of Eov, and did this person called Eov actually live? And the Gemara there is talking about that one of the opinions is Moshe Rabbeinu himself wrote the book of Eov as an allegory, as a description of how life works. Eov was punished, as I said, mida keneged mida, because he was quiet. He was punished with incredible suffering that he couldn't really complain about. Eov was one of the richest people in the world. He was one of the greatest people in the world. He had many, many children. And there was a discussion between the Satan, between the evil force and Hashem, as to how we handle Eov. And the Satan challenged Hashem, let's punish him and see how he reacts. And he was punished with terrible, terrible skin diseases. He was punished with losing all of his money, losing his children. He went through a lot in his life. And the allegory there is, everything that happens to us is there for a reason. Measure for measure, what we need to take in, what we need to absorb, how we need to act. Every act we do comes to us for a reason, and every way we act, the consequences of our actions are a result of the way we acted. So we don't like to call it a punishment. There's a consequence. We teach children, if you do this, you will be punished, is not the right way of talking to a child these days. Probably never was. We say the consequence of your action is that you will be not allowed to go out, or whatever the case might be. I don't know, in my day it was, you got 6 of the best.
Oh, yes.
I never got it, I was well behaved. But people did.
I got plenty.
Yeah?
You weren't so good.
Our school was not so in favor of hitting people, except for a couple of teachers, and if people did something really, really bad. But we had times where teachers would line up the class.
We had a Hebrew teacher Cheder like that, Mr. Shimoni.
Things have changed.
Ran around with a ruler.
Yeah, things have changed. I had a teacher in primary school who used to take boys and hit us on the back of our legs.
Oh,
And he wore rings on his fingers. I can remember once getting hit only once by him. I can't remember his name. It was, not very pleasant. But things have changed, and discipline has gone out the window at the end of the day. You look at what's the way the world is disciplined today, and I'm not talking about America and Trump and the disgraceful situation that's going on there. But there's only one person, I think, to blame. Biden. He's been going on and on and on about this MAGA and this destruction of democracy, and they're there to wipe out democracy, and Trump is about to kill democracy, and he's been going on and on about this before the last election. Eventually somebody listened to him. What I did hear this morning, which is sickening, is the number of people who have been posting videos, how sad they are that this attempted murder wasn't a murder. And the comments that have been coming attached, that's just scary.
To blame the war against Hamas.
Well,
He gave $6 billion and there's...
we don't lay blame on things all the time, but we can look at things, and they paint pictures in a way that's very, very different. But I don't want to talk about that. We've spoken about it now. Okay, so Eov was punished mida keneged mida because he kept quiet. He was punished with suffering. What was Bilam's punishment? Bilam was the one who decided that he was going to wipe out the Jews. So he needed to wipe out the Jewish boys because the Jewish boys are going to get out of Egypt. He's agreed with Paro. They came up with this plot. Bilam was eventually killed by the Jewish people. One Gemara says he was killed by Pinchas, who will meet at the end of this week's Parsha. And next week's Parsha is called Parshas Pinchas. So Balak, the king, the Midianite king of Moab, now sends these messengers to Bilam, who is the world's greatest sorcerer. He also happens to have prophetic ability, because the Jewish people, prophecy sat within the Jewish people. The nations of the world come to Hashem and complain, that's not fair. You give prophecy to your people, we need a prophet as well. And so it's brought down that Bilam could have been the equivalent of Moshe Rabbeinu in terms of his level of prophecy. However, he chose the dark side. He chose to be this magician. He chose to be a negative force. He still, however, Hashem still came to him, not in the same way as Moshe, because we know that there was no prophet like Moshe Rabbeinu. It's brought down that Moshe was the only prophet that Hashem spoke to face, which we learned about a few weeks ago with the Lashon Hora that Miriam spoke about Moshe, because Moshe didn't live with his wife Zipporah because he needed to be available to Hashem 24/7. Whereas other prophets, Hashem came to in a dream. It says Hashem spoke to Moshe panim el panim, face to face. And so Moshe was at a totally different level to all the other Jewish prophets. Bilam had that opportunity to be at that level, but he chose to take the side of evil. And we have these choices in life. Everything we do in life, we can choose. We are presented with things in front of us, and we can choose. Most of the time, most of us choose out of habit. We fall into the trap of just doing what we always did. We have something in front of us. Should I do the right thing or should I do the wrong thing? And we just choose to do what we always do. Sadly, for most people, that tends to be, firstly, it tends to be the habit, so we don't even really make a conscious decision. And secondly, it often tends to be the negative side, because that's usually much more attractive in the short term. We get this little short-term gain. Long-term could be very detrimental. But Bilam chose to keep doing the wrong thing through his life. So he's known as this prophet who has the ability to bless and to curse. And so Balak engages him to come and curse the Jewish people. So bottom of page 856, 857, he says to these messengers, just spend the night, stay here, I'll see what Hashem tells me. I'll go chat to Hashem tonight and see what Hashem will tell me. So they stayed overnight. I'm over the page now. So Hashem comes to Bilam at night and he says to him, Hashem comes to Bilam and he says, who are these people with you? Hashem often does this. We see Hashem does this right at the beginning of creation when Adam and Chava sin. Hashem comes to Adam and he says, did you eat from the tree? Hashem knows exactly what happened, but Hashem's trying to get us to own up to what we do, to take ownership of our lives. He says, who are these people with you? So Bilam says, Balak, the king of Moab, sent them. Behold, the people coming out of Egypt has covered the surface of the earth. Go and curse it for me, he said to me. Perhaps I'll be able to make war against it and I'll drive them away, because we're scared. These people, they're wiping everyone out. They're going to wipe us out. So Hashem says to Bilam, you can't go. You're not allowed to curse the people because it's blessed. The Jewish people are my nation. They're blessed. You can't go. So Bilam gets up in the morning and he comes to the officers and says, go away. Hashem's refused to give me permission. I'm not coming. So they go up and they go back to Balak and they say, no, Bilam refused. So Balak keeps on sending officers. He sends more and more senior people, higher in ranking those previously. In verse 16, they come to Bilam and they said, so says Balak ben Zippor, don't refrain from going. Please, you've got to come with us. I'm going to honor you greatly. I'm going to do everything you want. Everything you say, I'm going to do. Whatever you want, I will do for you. Just name your price. just come and curse his people. So Bilam says, if Balak will give me his house full of silver and gold, I can't transgress the word of Hashem. He's suddenly this holier than thou character. He says, Hashem told me I can't go, I'm not going. All right, but just stay the night and I'll see what Hashem will tell me. It plays itself over and over several times. So Hashem comes to Bilam again that night and he says, if the men who came to summon you arise and go with you, but only one thing I'm going to speak to you that you should do. So he got up the next morning, he saddled his donkey and he went with them. Now Hashem says, okay, you want to go, but you're going to do what I'm going to tell you to do. You're not going to be able to say what you want. It's what I'm going to tell you to say. Now, interestingly enough, it says at the bottom of 858, Vayakam Bilam Bilam got up in the morning, he saddled his donkey, she-donkey, and he went with the officers of Moab. He was trying to emulate what Avram Avinu had done. Avram was told to take his son, his only son, and go and offer him as a sacrifice to Hashem. Avram, after debate with Hashem as to who he should take, what he should do, in the Akedah, which we read on Rosh Hashanah, Abraham took Yitzchak, saddled his own donkey in the morning, and they went. Bilam is trying to replicate that. So he's a leading person. He's got servants who's going to do it for him, but he does it himself, and off they go. Hashem gets angry. Top of 860, 861. Hashem's anger flared up because he was going. The angel of Hashem stood in the road in front of him. So Hashem puts signs in front of us all the time. He puts these signs. So the angel of Hashem comes and stands in front of Bilam, who's riding on his donkey. And the donkey sees the angel. And the angel is standing there with a sword in his hand. So the donkey turns away from the road and ran into the field. So Bilam hit the donkey to go back on the road. Bilam clearly is not seeing this angel of Hashem, whereas the Torah quite clearly tells us, if you look in verse 23, the she-donkey saw the angel of Hashem standing on the road with his sword in his hand, drawn in his hand. So the angel of Hashem stood on the pathway, on the vineyards. There was a fence on one side and a fence on that side. And the she-donkey saw the angel of Hashem and pressed against the wall, pressing Bilam's leg against the wall. And Bilam continued to strike it. The angel of Hashem went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn right or left. The she-donkey saw the angel of Hashem crouched beneath Bilam. Bilam's anger flared and he struck the she-donkey with his staff. So we have three situations. They're walking on a pathway. The donkey veers off the path. Bilam strikes the donkey, get back on the path. They're then walking on a pathway where there's a fence on one side. So the first time it's an open field. The second time there's a fence. Bilam strikes the donkey again. The third time they're now on a narrow path. They can't move anywhere. The donkey rears up or whatever it does. Bilam strikes the donkey a third time. Bilam clearly is not seeing what is going on. And the next section, which we'll come to in a moment, is beyond understanding in terms of the discussion Bilam's going to have. But the three times, it's brought down by Chazal, the three times that this angel does something, veers off the path, it's got options. Bilam's been given options. He's coming along to curse. He's trying to emulate Abraham. He's coming along to curse Abraham's offspring. But he has two options. He can go both ways. He can curse Ishmael, or he can curse Abraham's children. He chooses that he wants to go ahead and curse Yitzchak, being Abraham's good child, as opposed to Ishmael, who had, although he did Shuvah, but he was the negative side of Abraham. The second time, there was one path. So the angel's saying, well, if you want to curse Yitzchak's children, maybe you should rather just curse Esav. Just curse one of them. Esav's the one you should curse, but he carries on going, wanting to curse the Jews. The third time, he had no option out of this. And he realized it's futile because he's being pushed into this narrow strait he's going to try and curse the Jews. He had a choice who he could curse first up. Could have cursed Ishmael, chose not to. Could have cursed Esau the second time, chose not to. Now he realized he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. When suddenly, in verse 28, Vayiftach Hashem es pi ha'asoin. Hashem opened the mouth of the donkey. And the donkey says to Bilam, Ma asisi lecha ki hakisani ze shalosh regalim. What have I done to you that you hit me these shalosh regalim? These 3 times. Shalosh regalim are what we call the 3 Yom Tovs. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, the shalosh regalim. The Jewish people are protected by the shalosh regalim. Do you know who you're dealing with? What did you hit me for? This is ridiculous. So then Bilam turns to the donkey and he says, because you mocked me, if there was only a sword in my hand, I would have killed you now. Now, let's just try and picture the situation. You've got a guy riding his donkey. The donkey veers off the path. He hits the donkey. Donkey veers off the path. He hits the donkey. The donkey veers off the path. He hits the donkey. The donkey turns around to him and says, what are you doing that you hit me these 3 times? I think most rational people's response will be, the donkey's talking to me? Something's different here. His response is, I should have killed you. If I had a sword, I would have killed you. Clearly, there's something wrong with Bilam in this whole process. Clearly. I mean, it doesn't make sense that his reaction to the donkey is, his reaction to the donkey is, what on earth is going on? There's a donkey speaking to me? Let's carry on. So the donkey says to Bilam, am I not your she-donkey that you've ridden upon me all your life until this day? Have I been accustomed to doing such a thing to you? He said, no, haven't. Bottom of 861. Now, that whole discussion with the donkey, firstly, where does a donkey get the ability to speak from? So we've learnt before that at time of creation of the world, just before Shabbos, it says Ben Hashmashos, at dusk, before sunset, as Shabbos was coming in the week of creation, Pirkei Avos says Hashem created 10 things. One of those 10 things was the hole in the earth that sucked in Korach and Dasan and Aviram and their families. Another one of those things is the mouth of the donkey. Hashem put this mouth of the donkey to be able to speak in play into the world, ready for this situation. How Bilam reacted, maybe the donkey would have spoken differently, but it was ready and waiting for this time. Another question with this donkey is that there were people from Moab. Now remember that Balak had sent different officers each time. Each time there were higher ranking officers with him. And he's got very, very senior princes and high delegates with him. And they were just in shock. They're standing there and they see this whole episode unfolding in front of their eyes. And it just made no sense to them that here's this guy who's coming along to curse the Jewish people, who's being thrown around by his donkey, and now he's talking to this donkey, and he wants to kill the donkey he's talking to. So they start laughing at Bilam. They said, look, hang on, you're riding a donkey that doesn't even listen to you. Look at you, you got absolutely no control of your animal, and yet you're going to curse the Jewish people and you're going to wipe them out. Who on earth are you? So he says, no, hang on, this is not even my donkey, I just borrowed her. So the donkey then comes up, and this is all in the Medrash. The donkey pops up and he says, hey, that's not quite true. I am your donkey. You've owned me since the day I was born. So Bilam then says, yeah, no, but you're not used to carrying people. You only carry loads. You've never had a person on you. So donkey says, hang on, you're a little bit wrong there because I'm used to you riding me all the time. So Bilam says, no, I only rode you once, like today. So the donkey says, no. Not only did you ride me all the time, I'm your faithful donkey that you rode on top of my back, and you actually involve me in your acts of bestiality, because you're at the lowest of low levels. I've been married to you, so to speak, my whole life. So don't come and tell me now that this is the first time I've ridden you, and don't tell me now that you've borrowed me or that I'm carrying loads. You know well and good who I am. And Hashem has opened my mouth to help you open your eyes so that you can see what's going on. So we turn the page onto 863, and Hashem, it says there, Vayigal Hashem es einei. Hashem opened his eyes, and he suddenly sees the angel of Hashem standing on the road with his sword drawn in his hand. And he suddenly bows down and lies down, prostrates himself on the floor. So the angel of Hashem now talks to him and says, why did you strike your donkey these 3 times? He says, I went out to impede you, for you hastened on the road to go against me. So she-donkey saw me and turned away these 3 times, but had it not turned away from me, I would even have killed you and let it live. So Bilam sees the angel and he suddenly says, oh, I've sinned. I've done the wrong thing. Had I known that you were standing opposite me on the road, I've done evil. I'm going to go back. So angel Hashem says, no, it's okay. You realize you've done the wrong thing, but no, go with these men. But just remember that whatever words you're going to say is what I'm going to put into your mouth. Hashem is instructing this angel to tell Bilam that he's not going to be able to curse the Jewish people. He is going to bless the Jewish people. Whatever is put into his mouth is what he's going to say. So it says, Bilam went, he heard what was said, and off he went with the men. Off they go to curse the Jewish people, or to bless the Jewish people. It seems like Bilam was completely blocked off. He blocked himself off through his negative actions his entire life. Even though Hashem came to him, even though the angel came to him, he just was unable to see the truth. He pulled this veil over himself and put himself so deeply into negativity that his whole life was negative. That's all he could see. In every line of this parsha, in every parsha, but there are so many messages for each of us. It just, the parsha, why would we have a parsha called Parshas Balak? Remembering who is Balak? Balak is a king who is trying to destroy the Jewish people through cursing them. And he's one of very few parshas in the Torah that are named after people. And the other parshas in the Torah are generally named after people. You got next week's parsha is Pinchas. Pinchas was, you got Brisi Shalom in next week's parsha. You got Hashem's covenant of peace. He became a Kohen. He became a Kohen Gadol. We've got Chaya Sarah. Sarah was Abraham's wife. She was one of the Imos, the leaders of the Jewish people. We've got Noach, a parsha is named after him. Noach was a tzaddik. And with Yisro. Yisro converted. He gave Moshe Rabbeinu his daughter Tzipporah. At the beginning we discussed what Yisro did when Paro and Bilam wanted to destroy the Jewish people. Yisro ran away. So most of the parsha, but yet Balak is given his own parsha in the Torah for coming to curse the Jewish people. The message has to be for us. What can we learn that Balak did wrong, that he invoked Bilam, that Bilam did wrong, that he should acquire a name in the Torah, that a whole parsha named after him? It's quite puzzling. So there's got to be lessons for each of us to take away from this parsha. That how can we learn? What can we learn for each of ourselves? Everyone on their own level, on their own selves, needs to learn something. That if Balak merited to get a parsha named after him, even though he was so evil and wanted to do such evil to wipe out the Jewish people, every one of us can grow and achieve greatness in our own right, just by changing small things. Okay, so Bilam comes along and he says, top of page 864, chapter 23, Vayomer Bilam el Balak, B'nei li b'zeh shiva mizbechos, v'hachein li b'zeh. Build for me 7 altars and prepare for me 7 bulls and 7 rams. We're going to make some offerings here so that through bringing these offerings, Hashem will allow us to curse the Jewish people. It's interesting that he's bringing 7 altars and 7 bulls and 7 rams. Our forefathers built 7 altars in the book of Bereshit. He's trying to emulate that, but each of them built 1 altar at a time. But they built 7. He's trying to build 7 altars in one go. So he's saying, I'm better than them. I'm greater. I'm going to be able to talk to Hashem through 7 altars, not through 1. So he says, stand by your burnt offering while I go. Maybe Hashem, he says, perhaps Hashem will happen towards me. He's not quite sure. He says, but maybe through these 7 altars, he says, Ulai, perhaps, maybe Hashem's going to come to me. And I'll tell him that I've prepared these 7 altars and brought a bull and a ram on each altar for you, Hashem. So he goes to Hashem, tells him, go back and say that this is what we're going to tell the Jewish people. And Bilam then comes and tries to bring his first curse to the Jewish people. And it turns out that the curse becomes a bracha. He blesses the Jewish people. In incredible poetry, he says, I mean, in the way the English they describe it here in verse 7, he declaimed his parable and said, from Aram, Balak, king of Moab, led me from the mountains to the east. Come curse Yaakov for me. Come bring anger upon Israel. How can I curse? God is not cursed. How can I anger? Hashem is not angry. He's doing exactly the opposite of what Balak had employed him to do. From its very origins, I see its rock-like. From its hill to I see, behold, it's a nation that will dwell in solitude and will not be reckoned among the nations. He's saying the Jewish people are different. We are completely different people. We are measured differently. The world should look up at us. And if we behave properly, the world will look up at us. Our role in life is to teach the world about Hashem's oneness. We say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Shema Yisrael, Shema means listen, it means hear, it means understand, it means accept. So we're saying to ourselves, Shema Yisrael, listen Jews, listen Jewish person. I'm saying to myself, every Jew says, listen Jewish people, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem right now is our God. It's one interpretation of Shema. One day, Hashem Echad, Hashem will be recognized by the world as the one and only God. Right now, the Jewish people are in that position where we recognize that Hashem, the unity of Hashem, He's our God. We want the world to recognize that unity as well. We don't want the world to all become Jews. Everybody has got their own position, their own things they need to do in the world. But everybody needs to recognize that Hashem is the one and only creator of the world, the one and only God. Echad there doesn't mean one, it means one and only. He's unique. Hashem is above everything else. He's different. We don't know what Hashem is. We can only describe what Hashem is not really. Because we can't perceive things that are metaphysical, that are beyond anything that's physical. We have limited perception of that. But we do know that Hashem is different to us. Hashem is not physical. Even though the Torah describes Hashem with physical attributes, it says Hashem's eyes, Hashem's hands, Hashem's sword, etc. We say Hashem has eyes because we need eyes to see. Hashem can see. We need ears to hear. Hashem can hear. Hashem is not physical. So we need to understand Hashem through our physical being, but knowing that He is completely beyond the physical. Okay, so Bilam ends at that first bracha for the Jewish people. Who has counted the dust of Jacob or numbered a quarter of Israel? May my soul die, the death of the upright, may my end be like his. You can imagine Balak standing next to him and hearing this incredible blessing as to really what he's talking about in this first blessing is the Jewish people, our origin, where we come from, and what is our destiny through time. We are here, we will be here through all of time. And we can see this. Every other nation that's come along, the most powerful nations are the ones that have always attacked us. The Egyptians were the most powerful nation on earth. The Babylonians were the leading power on earth. The Romans, the leading power. We got kicked out of countries. Spain, leading power at the time, kicked us out. Germany, the most cultured of all nations in modern history try to wipe us out. Every single person who tries to wipe us out meets their end. They unfortunately take many of us along the way, but it's always those leading people in the world who try to wipe us out because they know who we are. And that's why they need to invoke Bilam to try and wipe out the Jewish people at this time. So Balak is angry. He says, what have you done? You're supposed to, I brought you here to curse my enemy, and what are you doing? And you're blessing them. That's just unacceptable. So Balak says to him, all right, let's just go to a different place, because maybe in this different place you'll be able to curse the Jewish people. So he took him to a field where there were lookouts on top of a mountain. Again, they built 7 altars. They brought a bull and a ram on each altar. And Bilam says to Balak, stand here by your offerings, and I will be happened upon you. We'll see what Hashem comes and see what he says. So Hashem, again, just happens to come along to Bilam, and he puts an uttering in his mouth, and he says, and go back, and this is what you're going to say. So he comes to back, and he says his second parable, his second time that he now decides that he's going to bless the Jewish people. Give me a moment. Right. So now he says, God is not a man, verse 19 on page 867, that he should be deceitful, nor a son of man that he should relent. Would he say and not do, and speak and not confirm? Behold, to bless have I received. He has blessed, and I shall not contradict the blessing. He perceived no iniquity in Yaakov, and saw no perversity in Israel. Hashem, his God, is with him, and the friendship of the king is with him. It is God who brought them out of Egypt according to the power of his loftiness. For there is no divination in Jacob and no sorcery in Israel. Even now it said to Jacob and Israel, what has God wrought? Behold, the people will arise like a lion club and raise itself like a lion. It will not lie down until it consumes prey and drinks the blood of the slain. He's now talking about how great the Jewish people are. It's the most incredible nation, and they are protected from curses. Whatever we do and say against them, they will be protected. As long as they hold on to their Jewish identity and do what Hashem wants from them, they are protected. Hashem is there for them. Again, Balak is not quite very happy with him, as you would imagine. He says, Bilam says to Balak, let's go back one verse, verse 29. Balak says, neither shall you curse him and not shall you bless him at all. Just give up, it's enough. So Bilam says, have I not spoken to you saying whatever Hashem says shall I do? So Balak says, go now, I'll take you to a different place. Let's try a third time. Perhaps it'll be proper in God's eyes that you'll curse them from here. So he takes him to the summit of a mountain, top of a mountain that overlooks the face of a wasteland. And Bilam says to Balak, build again 7 altars for me, and prepare for me 7 bulls and 7 rams. So Balak did as Bilam had said. He brought the bull and the ram on the altar, and he saw Bilam now tries to curse the Jewish people a third time. We are in chapter 24, page 868, the bottom of the page. He saw what was good in Hashem's eyes to bless the Jewish people of Israel. So he did as every other time. And he raised his eyes and saw that Israel was dwelling according to the tribes. So he looks down at the Jewish people. Hashem allows him to look through the clouds. And he sees the tribes are encamped exactly as has been described in the Torah prior to this. A spirit of Hashem was on him. He declaimed his parable and said. So now the third parable he says. Top of page 870. Nu'um Bilam benoi Beor, u'nu'um hagever shesum ha'ayim. The words of Bilam, the son of Beor, the words of the man with the open eye. It's interesting he says the open eye. In all of this, what had actually happened was Hashem had blinded him in one eye. As part of his punishment. You could only see things through one eye. We use that English expression, a one-eyed person. So the words of the one who hears the sayings of Hashem, who sees the vision of Shakai while fallen and with uncovered eyes. He suddenly sees clearly. And he says those famous words which we use at the beginning of the Siddur every morning, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanesecha Israel. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. What did he see that caused him to say that? Look at these tents, because previously at the bottom of the previous page it said he saw the way the Jewish people were encamped. He suddenly realized that the Jewish people were camped in a way that every tent entrance and windows were facing a direction that they couldn't see into their neighbors. So you had tent one facing that way, another tent facing this way, the third tent facing that way. No people could look out their window and see what was going on in their neighbor, which is actually halacha. You're not supposed to see what's happening next door. We're not supposed to look what's going on in Yena's world. It's our world. We look internally at ourselves. If each of us looks at ourselves, then we'll get to where we're supposed to be. When we start looking at other people, either to see what they're doing, or to see how rich they are, or whatever it might be, it starts creating negativity in us. I saw a story brought in Torah Tavlin this morning as a parable, and he says there was this young man who'd made it rich. He was the proverbial self-made, I suppose we have to say billionaire in our times, because the millionaire today it's not a self-made millionaire anymore. You're going to buy a house in Caulfield, you're going to spend more than $1 million for a unit. So this self-made billionaire is riding along in his fancy new Maserati. He's driving along. He's going a little bit quicker than he probably should, and suddenly he feels a thud on the side of his car. Screeches to a halt, and he sees a kid standing on the side of the road having thrown a brick or a stone at his car. He looks out and there's a brick on the side of the road. He gets out of his car. Now you can imagine he's got his brand new Maserati. He's not a happy camper. It's got a dent in the side of the door. And there's this kid standing on the road like shaking. Now he's absolutely livid and angry. He slams the door closed. He kicks the brick out the side of the road, probably breaks his toe, but he goes up to this kid and he starts screaming at the kid, and he sees this kid is sobbing his eyes out. And he's suddenly taken aback and he says, "What are you doing? What did you throw this brick at my car for?" Kid said, "Sorry, sir. I had no choice. I'm sorry, sir. I really need your help. Over there, my brother fell out of his wheelchair and there's nobody here. I need somebody to help me pick him up and I had no choice, please." So guy suddenly his heart melts. He goes and he helps the boy pick up his brother and he puts him in the wheelchair and he takes out a tissue and he wipes down the grazes and wipes a bit of blood off the brother, and he sees that they're all okay. He says, "Are you okay to take your brother? Obviously I can't take him in my two-seater Maserati. But are you okay?" And the kid says, "Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sorry about that. It was the only way I could attract your attention. You were going so fast." And off the little kid pushes his thing. And the guy gets back in his car and a tear rolls down his cheek. And he closes the door and he drives off, never to repair that damage from that brick ever again, because he wants a reminder of how he acted.
Was a cry for help?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he heard the cry, thankfully. We all need to cry for help. The Jewish people were in Egypt. The Jewish people were enslaved, and they'd gone through slavery, and they'd gone through, and they were at the lowest of lows. And suddenly they scream out, "V'nitzak." We scream to Hashem. One of the verses we say in the Pesach Seder is "V'nitzak el Hashem." We scream to Hashem. We cried out to Hashem, and Hashem heard our voice. We need to cry out. That's what this is telling us. And so we got to the point here in the story of Balak where Bilam is about to curse us and he sees our tents, and we had got to a point where we were at a level where we had realized, hang on, we need to focus inwards. Each of us needs to look at ourselves. It's not for anyone else to tell me what to do. It's for me to work it out, obviously with guidance, but it's for me to work out, where can I improve myself? How can I do better? How can I take that next step? Bilam saw this and he said, "Oh, these Jewish people are actually in a good way." So he said, "Stretching out like brooks, like gardens by a river, like aloes planted by Hashem, like cedars by water. Water shall flow from his wells, and his seed shall be by abundant waters. His king shall be exalted over Agag, and his kingdom shall be upraised. It's God who brought him out of Egypt according to the power of his loftiness. He will consume the nations that oppress him and crush their bones, and his arrows shall pierce them. He crouched and lay down like a lion cub, Who can stand by him? Those who bless you are blessed, and those who curse you are accursed. Talking to the Jewish people. We have the ability. Avram Avinu was given the ability of blessing. We can bless people. We can curse people. So to this day, Jewish people go to our leaders, go to our Gadolim, to rabbis, to ask for a blessing. Not only rabbis, any Jewish person has the ability to give a blessing. We just need to know that we need to bless people. When somebody gives a blessing, our response needs to be Amen. Because we need to affirm that blessing. That's really what the Amen is. When we hear somebody say a bracha, we must always, when we can, obviously there's certain times you can't. If somebody's in the middle of davening and the chazan starts his repetition and you're still davening, you can't answer Amen in the middle of your own Shemona Esrei. So there's times where we have to be quiet, but whenever we have blessing, somebody takes out a cup of water and says, Shehakol niyeh bidvaro. Through Hashem's words, everything came into being. We answer Amen. We're affirming that we believe in Hashem, and that blessing is then elevated to a level. So when somebody gives a person a blessing that they should have whatever it is, our answer needs to be Amen always. And we need to seek out blessing, because as we say blessings to another person and we answer Amen to the blessing, or they answer Amen, Hashem hears that and takes that on board. And every Amen just brings us closer and closer to the ultimate Geula. The problem was that obviously Balak is now absolutely livid with Bilam. And Bilam says to him, well, hang on, didn't I tell your emissaries who sent me that it said that whatever you give me, if you give me a house full of silver and gold, I'm not going to transgress Hashem's words? Hashem basically said what he's going to tell me to say. I told you this, I'm sorry, but... So Bilam and Balak then say, well, how on earth are we going to get these Jewish people to do wrong, to do something wrong? And said, well, I think what you should do, says Balak, and I'm not going to read all inside, but Bilam comes along with this plot, and he says, the only way you are going to get these Jewish people to rebel against Hashem is to get them to sin. And the best way to get them to sin is, unfortunately, through relationships that we're going to entice them with women, because that might be the only way we'll get them to sin. And so they come up with this scheme whereby they set up a marketplace. And outside this marketplace, they have these stalls, and they set up women outside to chat to the men to come along and buy their wares. And the women that they put up outside are not necessarily the prettiest or the best looking of women, but they get to engage in conversation with them, and they say, well, look, there's better stuff inside. Why don't you go inside the store? And inside the stalls is the most beautiful Midianite women there. And they engage with these men, and they start talking to them and offering them wine, and they start getting some of the Jewish people to bow down to idols, and some of them to start thinking about sleeping with them, and the men are getting drunk. Look, I'm not going to do this. I'm not at that, I'm Hashem's chosen person, my nation's chosen. We're not going to do this. And slowly, they just whittle away, and they work on the Jewish people. And suddenly, some of the Jewish people start rebelling again. And they realize, they start bowing down to these idols. And they say to them, you don't have to bow down to the idol. All you have to do is do your bodily functions in front of the idol. Just go to the bathroom in front of the idol. The Jewish people, well, it's not so bad, I'm not bowing down to it. Little did they know that particular idol, that's the way that the people served it. They were depraved, the scheme that might have been. But that's how that idol was served. And the Jewish people then got into a very difficult situation. The Torah uses the phrase ha'am, the people. It often uses that phrase to describe that the Erev Rav, those people, the that Moshe took with him, all those extra people that attached themselves to the Jewish people when we left Egypt, were most of the people who were involved. If you look at chapter 25, 874, 875, V'yeshev Yisrael b'Shittim, Israel dwelled in Shittim, and the people began to commit harlotry with the daughters of Moab. They invited the people to the feasts of their gods. The people ate and prostrated themselves to their gods. If you look at in the Hebrew there, it says in verse 2, V'tikrena la'am l'zluchei Eloheim v'yochel ha'am v'ishtachavu le'Eloheim. The am talks about the am the whole time. So these people were sucked in, but then v'yitzamed Yisrael l'Baal Peor. The Yisrael became attached to this Baal Peor, this idol. And the wrath of Hashem then fled against Israel. So they were led astray again by this Erev Rav, by the But some of the Jewish people started to do inappropriate things with the women. And Hashem opened the clouds and they saw what was going on. And suddenly a few people were wiped out. And the tribe of Shimon suddenly decided that it's enough. And they wanted to bring these Midianite women in. And they started arguing with Moshe. They said, Zimri, the head of the tribe of Shimon, comes to Moshe and he says, you married a Midianite woman. Why can't I? What's wrong with me? I'm going to take a Midianite princess and I'm going to bring her into my tent. You are married to a Midianite woman. There are other people in your family married to Midianite women. It's quite clear that if it's okay for you, the leader of the Jewish people, why is it not okay for me? And Moshe's argument was, well, firstly, I married Zipporah well before the Torah was given. I was married to her, and when the Torah was given, she came and accepted Torah, and she became part of the Jewish people. You are wanting to just commit a sin with this woman based on your negative forces that are driving you right now. Don't go that way. And Zimri says, no ways, I'm going that way. And Zimri takes this Midianite princess and he brings her into his tent. And he puts guards outside the tent, and Moshe is blocked off. Moshe doesn't know what to do. And Moshe's nephew Pinchas comes along. It says there right at the end of the Parsha, Maftir, on the bottom of page 874. Vayar Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, vayakam mitoich ha'eda, vayikach roimach biyadoi. Pinchas ben Elazar, son of Aaron the Kohen, saw, and he stood up from amongst the assembly, and he took a spear in his hand. Moshe was blocked what to do. This is complete heresy. It's completely going against what Hashem has taught Moshe, the Jewish people, to behave like that. You're not allowed to do this in public. And Zimri took a spear in his hand. The only spear that was available was Moshe's staff. Moshe had a spear. Pinchas grabs the spear. He hides the tip of the spear in his cloak, and he goes in with this like a walking stick. And there's guards there. And he's standing at the tent and he says, I want to go and talk to this man. I want to be involved in this as well. And they let him in. And he goes in, and whilst they're in the middle of the act, he takes a spear and he stabs the two of them. Not killing them instantly, because it would have been a problem of tumah in that tent, because he would have had been in an oil in a tent with dead bodies. So he grabs them and he pulls them out on the spear and he raises them up and he says, is this what we have come to the Jewish people? The people are dying. And suddenly, right at the end of the Parsha, he followed the Israelite man into the tent. He pierced them both, the Israelite man and the woman, into her stomach. The Torah doesn't mention who they are at the moment. And the plague stopped from amongst the Jewish people. And unfortunately, Vayihu hamesim b'magefa arba ve'esrim aleph. 4,000 people died. 24,000 people died in this plague. And that's the end of the Parsha. And we have to wait till next week to find out what was Pinchas, who was Pinchas, why did he do it, what was going on here, and what did he receive? I said he received Brisi Shalom, covenant of peace. What does all that mean? Let's wait for next week to see what happens with Pinchas. What we need to know, which I think we've discussed quite a few times in this week's Parsha, is what message can we take from the Parsha? The message is, when something's in front of me, how am I going to act? What am I going to do? I've got something sitting in front of me. Do I act like this always? Do I change? Can I do something? Holding off Just this one time, this 1 minute. You know, they say the Chofetz Chaim brings, you've got a juicy piece of gossip, of Lashon Hara. You've heard something that is the best thing imaginable. You want to tell the world. And your normal course of events, gossip. You don't think Lashon Hara. Oh, this is such interesting stuff. I'm going to tell everybody. And you post on every WhatsApp group you've got. Chofetz Chaim says, and Chofetz Chaim didn't know about WhatsApp, don't worry. But he says, wait 1 minute. Just think about, maybe I shouldn't post this. Maybe I shouldn't tell X, Y, and Z. Let me hold off. And you hold off for a minute. And you hold off for 2 minutes or 5 minutes. The reward you get for holding off for that 1, 2, or 5 minutes is beyond any reward you can ever imagine in the next world. We will be rewarded for doing things like that. Just stopping for 1 moment, for 2 minutes, for 3 minutes, for 5 minutes. If you do come along and send it out, okay, you did it out of habit. Let's look at ourselves in a positive light. But next time we might be able to hold off for an hour, and the next time for a day, and maybe the 4th or 5th time, we might not even tell anybody about it. And that's about the process of flipping those habits. Just changing one small thing, 1 moment at a time. When something's in front of us and we don't do it, we've done it our whole lives and whatever, we're so used to doing something, and we just stop and say, not this time. The way to beat the Yetzer Hara, none of us can beat the Yetzer Hara, but we can push the Yetzer Hara off. We can tell the Satan, we can say, you know what, just leave me alone for the next 5 minutes, just go away. That's that juicy piece of gossip. Just say, come back in 5 minutes time and I'll deal with you then. Maybe the Yetzer Hara won't even come back in 5 minutes time, because we would have trained ourselves in such a good way that we just become better and better and better. I think that's the message of the Parsha. Just work on ourselves 1 step at a time so that we can come closer to Hashem.